Welcome to Fraud Trace Academy, the place where we uncover the world's most shocking fraud stories and expose the masterminds behind them. Before we dive into this unbelievable tale of money, power, and betrayal, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us as we track the biggest hustles ever pulled off. Because today's story, it's about a man who went from the dusty streets of Lagos to the shimmering skyscrapers of Dubai, all while calling himself the billionaire Gucci master, a man who lived a life so extravagant that he attracted not only millions of Instagram followers, but also the FBI, Interpol, and Dubai police. His name was Ramon Olorunwa Abbas, but you probably know him as Hushpuppi, and this is where it all begins. To understand the man who would one day sit in a penthouse surrounded by Louis Vuitton bags, Gucci shoes, and fleets of luxury cars, we have to go back to the chaotic, bustling heart of Lagos, Nigeria. Hushpuppi wasn't born into wealth. In fact, like many young Nigerians, he grew up with hardship as his daily reality. His father was said to be a taxi driver and his mother a small trader. The family struggled, and young Ramon quickly learned that if he wanted anything beyond the basics, he'd have to hustle for it. Lagos is a city of dreams, but also of survival. Every street corner is alive with ambition, where people hustle to make something out of nothing. Street hawkers chase buses with snacks and water bottles, while others weave their way into Nigeria's booming informal economy. For Ramon, this world shaped him. He watched as the rich and powerful strolled through Lagos malls in designer clothing, their wrists heavy with gold watches. He saw how the poor admired them, and how easily admiration could turn into envy. Somewhere in those early years, a seed was planted. He didn't just want to survive, he wanted to be seen. Like many youths in Lagos, Ramon experimented with small-time hustles. Some accounts suggest he started out washing cars or working menial jobs. Others say he dabbled in the internet cafe culture of the early 2000s, where cyber cafes became more than just a place to browse the web. For some, they were classrooms in a new type of hustle, online scams. Nigeria was already gaining global infamy for its so-called 419 scams, advanced fee frauds where victims were tricked into sending money with the promise of future riches. Whether Ramon started there or later found his way into more sophisticated schemes, one thing became clear: he had ambition far bigger than the neighborhood he came from. What set him apart wasn't just his hunger for money, it was his hunger for image. In a society where status is everything, Ramon noticed something critical. The people who got respect weren't always the richest. They were the ones who looked the richest. A Rolex watch, a Gucci belt, a Louis Vuitton bag. These were more than accessories. They were symbols of victory. In Lagos, if you wore Gucci, people assumed you had made it. If you pulled up in a Range Rover, you weren't questioned. You were admired. Ramon craved that admiration. He wanted to be envied, photographed, talked about. And soon, he discovered the perfect stage for his ambitions: Instagram. By the 2010s, Instagram had become the global runway for showing off wealth. Celebrities flaunted their homes, rappers showed off diamond chains, and influencers sold the dream of luxury living. Ramon saw an opportunity. He wasn't just going to use Instagram as a casual user, he was going to turn it into his personal empire. And so, Hushpuppi was born. The username itself carried meaning. Hush suggested secrecy, mystery. Puppy hinted at youthfulness, playfulness. Together, it became a name that sounded modern, flashy, and unforgettable. Hushpuppi carefully curated his posts: shopping sprees in Gucci and Versace stores, photos with private jets, supercars, and penthouses, captions dripping with confidence and motivational quotes. But here's the genius part: his lifestyle was so outrageous, so over the top, that people couldn't help but share his content. His follower count exploded. He wasn't just a man in designer clothes, he was a brand, the billionaire Gucci master. Before Dubai, there was Malaysia. Reports suggest that Ramon left Nigeria and moved to Kuala Lumpur, where he began living more comfortably, far away from the scrutiny of Lagos. This was a strategic move. Nigeria's reputation for fraud was already under heavy spotlight, but Malaysia offered more freedom, better connections, and less suspicion. It also gave him access to a new lifestyle, one he could broadcast to the world. By now, Hushpuppi was mastering the art of social media deception. His followers didn't care where the money came from. They just saw the lifestyle. Every new post became proof that he was living the dream. And in a world obsessed with validation, this was all the evidence people needed. But why was Hushpuppi's page so magnetic? The answer lies in psychology. People are drawn to aspirational figures. When someone shows you the life you wish you had, your brain rewards you with a dose of dopamine. Hushpuppi understood this better than most. He wasn't just showing off cars, he was selling a fantasy of never worrying about bills again, a fantasy of walking into Gucci and buying whatever you want, a fantasy of escaping poverty and being treated like royalty. His followers didn't just watch, they worshipped, and that worship gave him power. But while his fans saw him as a fashion king, law enforcement agencies around the world were beginning to see him as something else entirely, a red flag. By the late 2010s, Hushpuppi made his biggest move yet, to Dubai. Dubai was perfect, a city built on wealth, where supercars are as common as taxis and skyscrapers glitter under the desert sun. For Hushpuppi, it was paradise. Every corner was Instagram-worthy, every shop filled with designer goods, every skyline begging to be flaunted. He rented luxury penthouses, drove Rolls-Royces and Ferraris, and dined in five-star restaurants. His Instagram feed became a highlight reel of wealth most people could only dream of. In Dubai, he wasn't just another flashy guy. He was a legend. This is where the legend of Hushpuppi reached its peak. He wasn't hiding his lifestyle. He was showcasing it proudly to his 2.5 million Instagram followers. Celebrities followed him. Influencers wanted photos with him. Young fans saw him as proof that anyone could make it big. But what no one realized, or perhaps what too many people ignored, was that his very success was writing the first chapters of his downfall, because the same Instagram posts that made him famous were also leaving behind a digital trail, one that investigators were quietly following, one that would eventually expose him as a central figure in a $460 million fraud scheme. And that, right here, is where our story begins. A boy from the streets of Lagos, a man who reinvented himself as the Gucci master, and a trail of Instagram posts that would one day lead the FBI straight to his door. But how did he pull off these scams? What exactly was the $460 million hustle? And how did one Instagram post bring it all crashing down? When you hear the name Hushpuppi, one image comes to mind: a man draped in Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Versace, surrounded by supercars and five-star hotels. But here's the truth. This wasn't just a man living lavishly. It was a carefully constructed persona, one that turned Instagram into his stage, his weapon, and eventually his downfall. So how did Ramon Abbas, born in the bustling chaos of Lagos, manage to convince millions around the world that he was the billionaire Gucci master? Let's break down how he built one of the most infamous online identities in modern history. Instagram is more than just a photo app. It's a mirror of aspiration, a place where people show who they want to be rather than who they are. For most people, it's harmless, posting a vacation picture or a birthday celebration. But for Hushpuppi, Instagram was a psychological weapon. He knew exactly what triggers drew attention: luxury clothes, exotic destinations, expensive cars, confidence in every caption, and more than anything, consistency. If you posted one picture in Gucci, people might think you borrowed it. If you posted 100, they started believing you owned it. And Hushpuppi posted hundreds. Every single photo added another layer to the myth. The Gucci master wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. You might be wondering, why was Hushpuppi so obsessed with Gucci? Why not Armani, Prada, or even Balenciaga? The answer lies in branding. Gucci isn't just a clothing brand, it's a cultural symbol. It screams luxury, extravagance, and status. For someone building a persona rooted in excess, Gucci was the perfect costume. In fact, Hushpuppi himself once bragged online, "Gucci should be paying me for all this publicity." He wore Gucci head to toe, shoes, belts, shirts, even luggage, and he made sure to tag the brand in his posts, further fueling the association between his name and their logo. Soon, his followers didn't just see him as Ramon Abbas, they saw him as the embodiment of Gucci. And that's how the nickname stuck. The billionaire Gucci master. But Hushpuppi's genius wasn't just in the clothes, it was in the words. Scroll through his Instagram and you'll find captions that read like motivational speeches, quotes about success, destiny, and hard work, words designed to inspire envy and admiration at the same time. One of his famous lines was, "Started from the bottom, now we Gucci." To his fans, he wasn't just showing off, he was proof that you could rise from poverty to wealth if you dreamed big enough. But what most didn't realize was that the money behind the dream wasn't built on entrepreneurship or innovation. It was built on fraud. Still, the captions worked. They gave his lifestyle a veneer of legitimacy. They made people believe he was a businessman, not a scammer. Social media thrives on perception. And Hushpuppi understood one key principle. People don't follow the truth, they follow the spectacle. When he posted a photo with a Rolls-Royce, most people didn't stop to ask, is that car really his? They simply hit the like button, and every like, every share, every comment strengthened the illusion. His follower count skyrocketed, eventually surpassing 2.5 million. Celebrities began noticing him. Influencers wanted pictures with him. People who had no idea what he really did started calling him a role model. And for Hushpuppi, this wasn't just validation, it was protection. The bigger his following, the harder it would be, he thought, for anyone to question his legitimacy. The Gucci master became more than a person. He became a symbol. For young Nigerians, he was living proof that you could escape poverty. For international followers, he was the face of African luxury, a man rewriting the narrative of wealth from the continent. But what his fans didn't see were the cracks beneath the surface. Because behind every Gucci bag, every Lamborghini, and every champagne toast, there was something missing, evidence of a real business. He wasn't the owner of a tech company. He wasn't a real estate mogul. He didn't have any products, services, or investments to show for his millions. All he had were pictures. And while pictures could fool the public, they couldn't fool investigators forever. Not everyone bought into the Gucci master fantasy. Some followers began asking questions. What does Hushpuppi actually do? How can one man spend this much money without a visible business? Rumors swirled online. Some said he was into Yahoo, a Nigerian slang for internet fraud. Others believed he was laundering money for bigger criminal organizations. But Hushpuppi never flinched. He doubled down. When critics accused him of fraud, he brushed them off with sarcastic posts. When people mocked him, he clapped back with even flashier displays of wealth. It was a classic strategy. The louder the accusations, the louder the lifestyle. And it worked for a while. By the time he settled in Dubai, Hushpuppi had perfected his image. His penthouse overlooked the Burj Khalifa. His driveway looked like a luxury car dealership. Rolls-Royces, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. His wardrobe was worth more than entire apartment blocks back in Lagos. But it wasn't just about having these things. It was about showing them. Every dinner at a Michelin star restaurant, every shopping spree at a designer store, every champagne bottle popped in a Dubai nightclub. It all went on Instagram, and every post drew in thousands of likes and comments. To his fans, this was the dream life. To investigators, it was a neon sign flashing, "Look at me." The irony of Hushpuppi's story is this. His obsession with being seen was the very thing that made him vulnerable, because every photo he posted carried hidden data, locations, timestamps, patterns. Investigators could trace his movements, his purchases, even his connections, all from the pictures he uploaded. For example, when he posted himself buying luxury watches, authorities cross-checked the stores, the receipts, and the transactions. When he flaunted designer shopping bags, investigators asked the simplest but most dangerous question: how is he paying for all this? Hushpuppi thought Instagram made him untouchable. In reality, it was building the case against him, post by post, like by like. By this point, the billionaire Gucci master wasn't just an influencer, he was a myth. People made fan pages about him. Blogs wrote articles celebrating his style. He became the go-to example of African luxury in countless conversations. But here's the dark side of myths. They blind people from the truth. The myth of Hushpuppi was that he was a self-made billionaire, a man who rose from nothing to everything. The reality? He was part of an elaborate web of online scams, schemes that stole millions from unsuspecting victims around the world. And while his fans saw him as an inspiration, his victims saw him as a thief. By 2019 and 2020, Hushpuppi had reached his peak. He wasn't just posting about Gucci anymore, he was posting about global deals, business trips, and vague mentions of international connections. He was setting the stage to look like a serious mogul, but behind the scenes, whispers were growing louder. Law enforcement agencies across the globe, from the FBI to Interpol to Dubai police, were piecing together fragments of information. The Gucci master persona was no longer just a flashy distraction, it was evidence. What Hushpuppi didn't know was this: every single post was a breadcrumb, and somewhere in the offices of investigators, his Instagram feed was being studied, analyzed, and documented. The very empire he had built on likes and comments was about to crumble, because no matter how convincing the persona, no matter how carefully constructed the myth, one truth would remain unshakable. Real wealth doesn't need proof. Fraudulent wealth always leaves a trail. When you scrolled through Hushpuppi's Instagram, you saw a man living a life that looked like it was pulled straight out of a movie. But behind the Gucci bags and Lamborghini keys was a very different story, because Hushpuppi wasn't just an influencer, he was part of a hidden network, a shadowy underworld where billions vanish every year. And to understand how the billionaire Gucci master built his fortune, you need to understand the dark economy of online scams. Nigeria has long carried a reputation for online scams, a legacy rooted in the infamous 419 fraud. Here's how it worked. Scammers would send emails claiming to be princes, bankers, or government officials with millions of dollars trapped in an account. The catch? The victim needed to pay a small processing fee to unlock the fortune. It sounds ridiculous today. But in the 1990s and early 2000s, millions of people fell for it. The scam spread globally, and Nigeria's name became tied to the word scammer. By the time Hushpuppi was coming of age, that first wave of fraud was fading, but a new, more sophisticated version was on the rise. In Nigeria, the culture of online fraud became known as Yahoo Yahoo. Young men would gather in cyber cafes, learning the tricks of deception. They pretended to be wealthy foreigners, lonely women, or even business executives. They built fake identities, ran romance scams, and created fraudulent websites. Over time, Yahoo Yahoo became a subculture, complete with slang, music, and fashion. And at the top of this culture was one golden rule: flash your wealth. If you succeeded in scams, you had to show it off. That's how you earned respect. Hushpuppi didn't just follow this rule, he took it global. While romance scams and fake lotteries grabbed headlines, there was one scheme far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more lucrative: business email compromise, or BEC. Here's how it worked. Scammers hacked into or impersonated a company's email system. They studied communication patterns, who sent invoices, who approved payments. At the right moment, they sent a fake invoice that looked legitimate. The company wired millions straight into the scammer's account. No guns, no masks, no getaway cars, just a laptop, some patience, and the right target. By the late 2010s, BEC scams were stealing billions annually, and law enforcement would later accuse Hushpuppi of being connected to some of the biggest cases. Fraud wasn't just a Nigerian operation, it was global. Networks stretched across Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America. Money was moved through money mules, people who received funds in their accounts and forwarded them for a cut. Cryptocurrencies were sometimes used to hide transactions. Shell companies provided fake paperwork. Fake passports and identities were common tools of the trade. And in this web, Hushpuppi was a key figure. Not necessarily a hacker himself, but a connector. A man who helped launder money, coordinate schemes, and use his legitimate image as cover. The irony? While his partners worked in the shadows, Hushpuppi lived in the spotlight. Why would a man connected to such high-stakes scams flaunt his wealth so publicly? The answer lies in psychology and arrogance. To the outside world, Hushpuppi's Instagram was proof of success. To insiders, it was advertisement. Think of it this way. If you were running a multi-million-dollar scam and needed someone who could handle big money, who would you trust more? A random person you met online, or the man with 2.5 million followers, rubbing shoulders with celebrities and living in a Dubai penthouse? Hushpuppi's Instagram wasn't just vanity, it was marketing. Every post said, "I'm successful, I'm connected, and I can handle millions." And that made him the perfect partner in global fraud schemes. Not all of Hushpuppi's alleged operations were cold corporate fraud. Some were deeply personal. Romance scams target lonely individuals, convincing them they've found love online. Victims are groomed, emotionally manipulated, and then exploited for money. Imagine an elderly widow sending her life savings to a man she believes is a U.S. soldier stationed overseas, or a young woman wiring money to her fiancé who promises to join her soon. Behind these heartbreaking stories were organized fraud rings, and, according to investigators, Hushpuppi was no stranger to these networks. To him, it wasn't about love, trust, or loyalty. It was about money. Always money. One of the most shocking allegations tied to Hushpuppi was an attempted heist of $100 million from an English Premier League football club. Yes, you heard that right. Not a small business, not an individual, a globally recognized sports brand. Hackers infiltrated email systems, and the plan was set: siphon off $100 million through fake invoices and hidden accounts. But investigators intervened before the money disappeared, and once they traced the trail, all roads pointed to one Instagram star, the billionaire Gucci master. It's easy to see Hushpuppi's lifestyle and think of it as entertainment, designer bags, jets, and jokes about Gucci. But behind every dollar he flaunted was a victim. A small business that couldn't make payroll because millions vanished. A retiree who lost life savings to a fake romance. A company that shut down after being crippled by fraud. These weren't faceless losses. They were real people, real families, real pain. And the man enjoying champagne in Dubai nightclubs was celebrating with stolen dreams. At this point, you might wonder, if Hushpuppi was making so much money, why didn't he stop? Why not quit while ahead? The answer is simple. Addiction. Fraud, like gambling, is addictive. The rush of pulling off a big scam. The thrill of millions hitting your account. The validation of likes and comments online. It becomes a cycle you can't escape. For Hushpuppi, every post had to be bigger than the last. Every car flashier, every penthouse higher, every Gucci suit louder, because if he slowed down, if he showed even a hint of weakness, the illusion would crumble. He wasn't just addicted to money, he was addicted to attention. While Hushpuppi's followers cheered him on, others were watching in silence. The FBI, Interpol, Dubai police. Every flashy post was quietly archived, every caption analyzed, every trip cross-referenced. Law enforcement agencies don't rush, they build, they wait, they gather evidence piece by piece until the case is airtight. And Hushpuppi was handing them everything on a silver platter, because in his obsession to be admired, he left a digital footprint so obvious it was impossible to ignore. By 2020, the net was closing in. Behind the scenes, investigators had tied Hushpuppi to over $460 million in fraud. But to his followers, nothing seemed wrong. His Instagram still sparkled with photos from Dubai malls, five-star dinners, and high-end boutiques. His captions still dripped with confidence. It looked like the dream would never end. But what Hushpuppi didn't know was that his empire was about to collapse. And when it did, it wouldn't be quiet. It would be spectacular. Dubai, a city where ambition touches the sky, where supercars line the streets, and where luxury is not an exception, it's the rule. For Hushpuppi, this was heaven. It was the perfect backdrop for the character he had spent years building online, the billionaire Gucci master. But while his followers saw glitz, glamour, and endless success, investigators saw something else. Because the same Dubai lifestyle that made him famous was also leaving behind a trail of receipts, locations, and digital fingerprints, the breadcrumbs that would one day seal his fate. By the mid to late 2010s, Hushpuppi had relocated from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Dubai. Why Dubai? The city offered exactly what he wanted. Luxury shopping at the Dubai Mall, the largest mall in the world. Endless high-rises including the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building on Earth. Anonymity in opulence. Because in Dubai, nobody asks how you got rich. If you pulled up in a Rolls-Royce, people didn't question you. They admired you. And for someone like Hushpuppi, who thrived on admiration, Dubai was the ultimate stage. He moved into a penthouse apartment with panoramic views of the city. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, private elevators, the kind of place most people could only dream of. From here, he broadcast his lifestyle to the world. Every day, Hushpuppi posted new content, shopping sprees at Gucci, Versace, and Louis Vuitton, dinner tables stacked with champagne bottles and gold-plated dishes, keys to new Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, and Bentleys, piles of cash laid out like trophies. His captions were designed to sting with envy and inspire admiration. Things like, "Tell your boss to work harder because my driver makes more than him." To his 2.5 million followers, this wasn't just entertainment, it was proof that he had made it. But what they didn't realize was that every photo told investigators a story. When Hushpuppi posed in a luxury boutique, investigators noted the store, the date, the purchases. When he tagged his location at a hotel, they cross-checked his travel movements. When he flashed designer watches, authorities compared them against suspicious transactions and stolen funds. Every picture wasn't just a flex, it was a confession in plain sight. And the irony, he was the one uploading the evidence against himself. Dubai is known for its car culture. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bugattis, they're not rare sights. But Hushpuppi took things to another level. He didn't just buy supercars, he collected them. His garage looked like a showroom. Rolls-Royce Wraiths, Ferrari 488s, a Lamborghini Aventador, the list went on. And of course, every new car became an Instagram post. But here's the problem. Those cars weren't just expensive. They required proof of purchase, registration, and ownership. And when law enforcement started digging into the paperwork, the numbers didn't add up. How could a man with no legitimate business empire afford a fleet worth tens of millions? The Gucci master's fame didn't stay confined to Instagram. He rubbed shoulders with celebrities, influencers, and even politicians. Nigerian pop stars posed with him. International influencers tagged him. And the more famous he became, the harder it was for investigators to ignore. He wasn't just another online scammer. He was a global influencer living off fraud money. In a twisted way, his fame accelerated his downfall, because when you're just a name in a spreadsheet, you can hide. But when you're the billionaire Gucci master with millions of fans, you can't. Dubai nightclubs are some of the most extravagant in the world, and Hushpuppi was a regular. Champagne showers, VIP booths, gold bottles, confetti raining from the ceiling. Every night was a performance. But each swipe of his credit card left a record. Each luxury receipt left a paper trail, and authorities were quietly collecting them. The louder the music got, the closer the walls closed in. While his followers believed Hushpuppi was a self-made mogul, the truth was darker. Behind the Gucci bags and rented jets were scams, stolen funds, and victims who had lost everything. Hushpuppi wasn't a businessman. He was a frontman, someone who flaunted the spoils while others helped orchestrate the fraud. And his Instagram? It wasn't just a flex. It was a mask. But here's the thing about masks. Eventually, they slip. By 2019, law enforcement agencies had already been watching him for years. The FBI had tied him to BEC scams worth millions. Interpol had flagged him as a high-profile target. Dubai police had begun tracking his every move. And all the while, Hushpuppi thought he was untouchable. He believed his fame was protection, that no one would dare bring down the Gucci master. But behind the scenes, investigators were building the case of a lifetime. To the world, nothing seemed wrong. Hushpuppi was still posting flashy outfits, private jets, and luxury dinners. His followers still flooded the comments with heart emojis, fire symbols, and cries of admiration. But quietly, the walls were closing in. Dubai police had given his case a name, Operation Fox Hunt 2. And soon, the Gucci master's dream life would be shattered in the most dramatic way possible. When you hear the name billionaire Gucci master, the first thing that comes to mind is wealth, not fraud. But behind Hushpuppi's flashy Instagram feed was a dark empire of online scams that spanned the globe. The numbers were shocking. Investigators would later link him to schemes worth over $460 million. But how did he pull it off? And why was Instagram, the very platform that made him famous, the final piece of evidence that destroyed him? Hushpuppi wasn't just running petty scams. His specialty was business email compromise, or BEC. Here's how it worked. Hackers would gain access to a company's email system. They would impersonate executives or suppliers. Then they tricked employees into wiring large sums of money to fraudulent accounts. These weren't small-time victims. We're talking about international banks, major law firms, and wealthy individuals. One scam alone targeted a European law firm for $40 million. Another attempt involved stealing nearly $124 million from an English Premier League football club. And at the center of these transactions was a man who posted selfies in Gucci robes. At first, Hushpuppi was just one of many scammers under observation, but the sheer scale of his operations and his audacity online drew the attention of the FBI's cybercrime unit. They began piecing together evidence, wire transfers, email records, IP addresses, bank accounts spread across Nigeria, Dubai, and beyond. And every time Hushpuppi uploaded a new photo, the FBI smiled because Instagram was confirming their suspicions. When he posted himself with a brand new Rolls-Royce, investigators cross-referenced it with suspicious payments that had just moved through hacked accounts. When he flaunted designer watches, they traced the purchase dates and matched them against fraudulent transfers. It was as if Hushpuppi was writing his own indictment in real time. For Hushpuppi's millions of followers, his lifestyle was inspirational, but for the victims, it was devastating. Businesses collapsed because funds meant for payroll were stolen. Law firms lost millions meant for client settlements. Families were left scrambling when house payments disappeared into fraudulent accounts. Behind every flashy photo, there were real people suffering, and that made law enforcement even more determined to bring him down. Hushpuppi had mastered Instagram as a tool for branding. He called himself the billionaire Gucci master. He dressed in the boldest outfits, dripping in logos. He told his fans, "I inspire millions of youth to chase their dreams." But what he didn't realize was that Instagram was also a forensic goldmine. Every geotag revealed his location. Every shopping spree documented his spending. Every luxury item could be matched to financial fraud records. It wasn't just vanity. It was evidence. By early 2020, the FBI, Interpol, and Dubai police had enough to close in. They tied Hushpuppi to over $40 million stolen from a U.S. company, $14.7 million stolen in a cyber heist targeting a bank, dozens of BEC scams totaling nearly $460 million. But what truly tied the bow around the case was his own Instagram, because while most criminals hide, Hushpuppi broadcast his crimes. And that made him easy to catch. Dubai police launched the raid in June 2020. It was called Operation Fox Hunt 2, and when they stormed Hushpuppi's penthouse in the middle of the night, they found over $40 million in cash, stuffed in suitcases and bags, 13 luxury cars worth millions, 21 laptops, and 47 smartphones, all containing incriminating evidence, hundreds of credit cards, and fake passports. The footage of his arrest went viral. The world watched as the Gucci master, once the king of Instagram luxury, was dragged away in handcuffs. For years, Hushpuppi believed he was untouchable, that his fame made him immune, that no one could connect the man in Gucci to the shadowy scams online. But in the end, it was his fame that destroyed him, because the same Instagram posts that made him a star made him a prisoner. The world watched in shock when the viral videos of Hushpuppi's arrest hit the internet. The so-called billionaire Gucci master, the man who flaunted his wealth to millions, was now being marched out of his Dubai penthouse by armed police. But the drama was only beginning, because this wasn't just about Dubai. This was about international fraud, and the U.S. wanted him. Shortly after his arrest in June 2020, Hushpuppi was handed over to the FBI. Why? Because some of his biggest scams directly targeted American companies and banks. Within weeks, Hushpuppi was flown to the United States to face trial. The flashy influencer who once posed in private jets was now boarding a plane in handcuffs, destined not for luxury but for justice. When the court hearings began, the evidence was overwhelming. Emails linking him to fraudulent wire transfers, phone records showing communication with hackers, IP addresses connecting him to scams across multiple countries, his own Instagram photos tying luxury purchases to stolen funds. In fact, prosecutors repeatedly pointed out that Instagram was their strongest tool. It wasn't just social media, it was a timeline of his crimes. By July 2021, Hushpuppi did something unexpected. He pleaded guilty. Why? Because the evidence against him was airtight. There was no escape, no loophole, no flashy lawyer who could outshine the trail he had left. He admitted to laundering money through BEC scams and cyber heists that added up to hundreds of millions of dollars. The Gucci master mask had finally slipped off. In November 2022, the verdict came down. Hushpuppi was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison for a man who lived like a king. It was the ultimate downfall. Gone were the Gucci robes, the Rolls Royces, and the champagne nights, replaced instead with a prison jumpsuit, steel bars, and the weight of reality. He was also ordered to pay back over $1.7 million to his victims, but compared to the billions he flaunted online, it was a hollow repayment. The sentencing sent shockwaves across the globe. His fans were heartbroken, claiming their idol was misunderstood. His critics said justice had finally been served. For the victims, it was a bittersweet ending. Their money was gone, but at least the man behind the scams was caught. The fall of Hushpuppi wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a warning. Hushpuppi's story is more than just a tale of fraud. It's a case study in digital footprints. Every post, every caption, every photo, they all became evidence, and it shows us something powerful. In the digital age, even the most glamorous mask cannot hide the truth. Here at Fraud Trace Academy, we tell these stories for a reason, not just to entertain, but to educate. Because for every Hushpuppi, there are hundreds more trying the same tricks. And the only way to protect yourself is to stay informed. So if you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to subscribe to Fraud Trace Academy, because the next case we expose might be the one that shocks you the most. When Hushpuppi fell, the sound echoed far beyond his Dubai penthouse. This wasn't just the downfall of one man, it was the exposure of an entire underground empire. For years, online fraud had been treated like a distant problem, something whispered about but never fully understood. But when the billionaire Gucci master was dragged out in handcuffs, the world finally paid attention. Hushpuppi wasn't just another scammer, he was Nigerian. And almost overnight, his arrest put Nigeria back in the global spotlight for cybercrime. Headlines screamed, Nigerian Instagram star arrested for $460 million fraud. For many, it reinforced a stereotype, painting Nigerian youths as fraudsters, despite millions of honest, hard-working people trying to change that narrative. Inside Nigeria, reactions were mixed. Some saw him as an embarrassment. Others, shockingly, still saw him as a role model, proof that in a world stacked against them, he had made it. The conversation was messy, but unavoidable. The platform that made Hushpuppi famous also came under scrutiny. For years, he flaunted questionable wealth on Instagram without a single red flag raised. His account had 2.5 million followers, more than the population of some countries. Critics asked, why didn't Instagram question his suspicious lifestyle? Should social media companies be monitoring users who display unexplained wealth? The truth is, Instagram had no system for this, and Hushpuppi's case proved just how powerful and dangerous the platform could be for building criminal personas. Another ripple effect hit the luxury fashion industry. Gucci, Versace, Louis Vuitton, brands he constantly promoted, were suddenly being tied to fraud. They never endorsed him officially, but his obsession with their products made them part of his brand. For these companies, it was a nightmare, because while they thrive on exclusivity and wealth, Hushpuppi's arrest forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. Not every flashy customer has legitimate money. For investigators worldwide, the case became a textbook example of how to track cybercriminals in the digital age, use social media as evidence, follow the digital trail of luxury spending, cross-reference geotags with suspicious transactions. Hushpuppi's case proved something powerful. Even the smartest fraudster can be undone by a simple Instagram post. Ironically, Hushpuppi's fall also inspired copycats. Some fraudsters tried to step into his shoes, flaunting wealth online as if to claim the title of the next Gucci master, but others saw his downfall as a cautionary tale, a warning that no matter how glamorous fraud looks, the ending is always the same: prison. Perhaps the most important ripple effect was awareness. Businesses began tightening their cybersecurity. Banks invested in fraud detection systems. Ordinary people started questioning the influencers they followed. The Gucci master wasn't just a scammer, he was a wake-up call. By telling Hushpuppi's story, we're not glorifying him, we're exposing him. We're showing the world that behind the designer clothes and Instagram likes was a trail of broken lives and stolen money. And if you're still watching, it means you want to learn to protect yourself. and to see through the masks of fraudsters. When people think of Hushpuppi, they picture Rolls Royces, Gucci robes, and Dubai skyscrapers. But behind every one of those luxury photos was a victim. For every champagne night, there was a small business that couldn't make payroll. For every Gucci shopping spree, there was a family that lost their savings. For every private jet flight, there was a bank dealing with millions in losses. And that's the side of the story most people forget. One of Hushpuppi's biggest scams targeted a U.S. company. The fraudsters hacked into email chains, impersonated executives, and tricked the company into wiring tens of millions of dollars. The result? Hundreds of employees didn't get paid. Projects collapsed. The company's reputation suffered permanent damage. For Hushpuppi, it was just another transaction. For the workers, it was their livelihoods. Another scam involved a law firm handling a client settlement. The hackers inserted fake banking details into the email chain, rerouting the money to accounts controlled by Hushpuppi's network. The firm not only lost millions but also lost its clients' trust. Imagine going to a lawyer for protection, only to lose everything in the process. That was the reality his crimes created. In one of the boldest attempts, Hushpuppi's team targeted an English Premier League football club. The plan? Steal over $124 million through fake invoices and wire transfers. While the attempt failed, it showed the insane scale of his ambition. This wasn't small-time fraud. This was a man trying to rob one of the richest football institutions in the world. Beyond the headlines and big numbers, there were ordinary people who suffered. A couple who wired house payments to a fraudulent account, a student whose tuition funds disappeared, families whose life savings vanished overnight. For them, Hushpuppi wasn't just an Instagram celebrity. He was the reason they had to start over from nothing. What made Hushpuppi's crimes so cruel wasn't just the money, it was the emotional impact. Victims described feelings of shame for being tricked, fear that it could happen again, anger that someone could live in luxury while they suffered. Fraud doesn't just empty bank accounts, it breaks trust, and that trust is far harder to rebuild than money. When the world looked at Hushpuppi's Instagram, many fans saw inspiration, but the victims saw pain. And that's why telling their stories matters, because without them, we risk glamorizing a man who lived off other people's misery. If you take anything from this chapter, let it be this: fraud isn't a victimless crime. Every fake email, every stolen dollar, every flashy Instagram post, they all come at a cost, and that cost is paid by real people. Hushpuppi's crimes weren't just about money. If it was only about money, he would have stopped long before hitting hundreds of millions. So why didn't he stop? Why did he keep posting, keep flaunting, keep risking everything on Instagram? To understand that, we have to step inside the mind of a fraudster. For Hushpuppi, Instagram wasn't just social media, it was oxygen. Every like, every comment, every share, it was a dopamine hit. A rush that made him feel untouchable, adored, invincible. Fraud gave him money, but Instagram gave him validation. And validation is addictive. That's why he didn't just buy one Rolls Royce, he bought 3. Not because he needed them, but because he needed to prove he was better than everyone else. Psychologists call it the Superman complex. Fraudsters who live too long without consequences begin to believe they're invisible, that no law can touch them, that they're smarter than the system. For years, Hushpuppi lived like this. Every successful scam, every untouched Instagram post reinforced the lie that he was untouchable. But invincibility is always an illusion, and the bigger the illusion, the harder the fall. Hushpuppi called himself the billionaire Gucci master, not successful businessman, not entrepreneur, but master. It was more than branding, it was ego. Fraud wasn't just his hustle, it was his crown. He wanted the world to bow, not just to his wealth, but to his identity as someone who beat the system. And the problem with crowns is that once you put them on, you'll do anything to keep them shining. Studies of high-level fraudsters reveal common traits: narcissism, an obsession with self-image and admiration; impulsiveness, chasing instant gratification over long-term stability; justification, convincing themselves that victims are faceless and therefore don't matter. Hushpuppi showed all of these traits. He wasn't just flaunting wealth, he was convincing himself he deserved it, no matter the cost to others. The question everyone asks: if he had so much money, why didn't he just stop? The answer is simple: because for Hushpuppi, It was never about money. Money was just the tool. The real prize was recognition, fame, influence, admiration. Stopping meant fading into obscurity. And for a man addicted to the spotlight, obscurity was worse than prison. In the end, the very thing that fed his ego, Instagram, was the thing that destroyed him. His addiction to validation blinded him to the reality that he was leaving behind a trail of evidence. He thought Instagram made him invincible. Instead, it made him vulnerable. That's the tragic irony of Hushpuppi's story. The king of Instagram was brought down because of Instagram. Fraudsters don't live forever in luxury. They live in fear, chasing validation until the walls close in. Hushpuppi's story shows us this. Behind every flex, there's desperation. Behind every scam, there's emptiness. Behind every fraudster, there's a ticking clock. And when the clock runs out, no amount of Gucci can save you. Hushpuppi's downfall didn't end with handcuffs. It didn't end with the courtroom. And it didn't end with his prison sentence, because the echo of his story is still alive on social media, in fraud circles, and in the lives of those who admired him. The ghost of Gucci Master. Even after his arrest, his Instagram account stood as a museum of luxury. Photos of Lamborghinis, private jets, and Versace robes remained frozen in time, like relics of a lost kingdom. For some, they are cautionary tales. For others, they are still aspirations. And that's the danger. Fraudsters don't just steal money, they steal dreams. They poison ambition, making young minds believe the only way to succeed is to cheat. The lesson for a generation. Hushpuppi once wrote in his captions that he was the man you wish you could be. But now, he's the man behind bars. The truth is this: luxury without legitimacy is a prison waiting to happen. Every scam is a chain. Every lie is a lock. And one day, the door will slam shut. That's the lesson Hushpuppi left behind. And it's the lesson we at Fraud Trace Academy refuse to let fade. The ripple effect. His case didn't just make headlines. It sent ripples across the world. Governments tightened online fraud laws. Tech companies built better tracking systems. Victims became more cautious with their money. But it also created a darker ripple. Fraud groups saw Hushpuppi as a legend, a figure who made it before falling. That's why stories like this must be told, not glamorized, because the truth is darker than any flex could ever hide. The final warning: if you're listening right now and you think fraud is the fast way out, ask yourself this: do you want a moment of applause or a lifetime of freedom? Do you want Instagram likes or a legacy that doesn't end in prison? Because Hushpuppi's empire wasn't built on success. It was built on sand. And when the tide came in, it washed everything away. Closing with Fraud Trace Academy. At Fraud Trace Academy, our mission is clear: to trace the lies, to expose the scams, and to teach you the truth behind the fraud. If you've stayed with us through this journey into Hushpuppi's rise and fall, hit subscribe right now, because we're only getting started, and the next story might just shock you even more. Remember, fraud is a trap. Knowledge is the escape.